Beautiful. I think we're going to rearrange the stage quickly, but I, of course, will give you a glimpse of what's coming up then in our session. We are here to discuss the 3 different environmental frameworks that were created at the Earth Summit in Rio in 1992. And my panel guests, of course, they are all experts in the field. They have tremendous experience working within the frameworks of climate change, of biodiversity and desertification. Of course, the world has changed quite a bit since 1992, and this is also, of course, a good thing. But especially in these geopolitical storms that we are facing today, when public funds are scarce and under threat, when multilateralism is getting eroded and the multilateral framework is a bit shaky, to say at least, we need to elaborate a little bit more on that, and we want to better understand how must be the system redesigned for building up resilience, and what are pathways for cooperation and for mind shift towards what Elizabeth just mentioned, towards a generation restoration in science, policy, in the corporate sector, and the collaboration, and of course, in the funding coherence. So please, my distinguished panel guests, join me here on stage, and I will do a proper introduction when we are seated. Your Excellencies. Voilà, ici, d'accord, merci. Beautiful. I'd like to give you a proper introduction, of course, before we are diving into our conversation. Next to me seated is the Vice Minister of Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, joining us from Mongolia, His Excellency Mukhtamir Batbaya. Also a round of applause. Seated in the center position here, Monsieur Laurent Fabius, President of COP21, former Prime Minister of France, but also leading the Circles of Presidents for COP30 in Belein, a group bringing together the COP presidents. Monsieur Fabius, thank you, merci. And last but not least, Your Excellency, Mr. Mher Margaryan, Ambassador and Special Envoy for the COP17, and he's the Armenian Chief Negotiator from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Armenia. Monsieur Fabius, I'd like to start with you because when we're looking, of course, in your CV, you were playing a pivotal role when it comes to the Paris Agreement, creating a unifying global climate framework, and today we are facing parallel frameworks on biodiversity and land degradation. So in this new world order, and I mentioned as well the multilateralism and the multilateral frameworks are a bit shaky right now, where do you see the gaps for concrete governance or finance mechanisms that are still missing today for combining the 3 agendas? It's a big question right at the beginning.
Yeah, it's not easy. Well, first, I'm very pleased to be here with my colleagues and with all of you, and you will forgive my pidgin English. Yes, well, I have chaired the COP21, which is supposed to be the best one, the Paris Agreement, and the context was quite different. When I'm asked about the secrets of the success, I usually answer that the secret is the 3 S: science, society, and states. At that time, it was 2015. Science was not criticized as much as today. Society, there was rather large support among companies, among people, among NGOs, and so on and so forth, in favor of fight against climate change. And states, because at that time, it was not this turmoil as today. These 3 S, unfortunately, have either disappeared or they are attacked. Science is attacked, society, you have the backlash, and I'm not speaking very long about the international turmoil. Therefore, the 3S must be replaced by something else, We have tried to do that in the field of fight against climate change with the Belém COP, and we shall keep on, I hope so, in Turkey and then in the various COPs. But, and it comes to our topic. 10 years ago, we were not thinking about the relationship between climate, land and biodiversity, let's be honest. Okay. But step by step, we became aware that everything is linked. And therefore, I think today, with my own experience, being both ambitious and realistic, that we have to adapt our governance in the field of the different COPs. And I'm quite ready in 3 minutes to explain with my own experience what can be the changes for the next governance.
This is a perfect cliffhanger for a second question to you in just a minute about how the structures need to be redesigned. Monsieur Fabius, thank you for that start. I'd like to come back to Your Excellency, but of course, I mentioned earlier this big number. It is all needed. The goal is clear, restoring 1.5 billion hectares of degraded land by 2030. And of course, with the COP happening in Mongolia right now, the COP17, it's all framed with the topic of restoring land and restoring hope when we follow along, of course, of your perspective. So give us a little bit of a glimpse of the Mongolian perspective. What gives you then the confidence that this COP will change and can move from commitments to really large-scale action when we need these big numbers to tackle?
Thank you for calling out. Well, of course, the COP is, the COP17 is, it's not only a conference. It is a platform for all the stakeholders to engage, the governments, private sectors, investors, and the local communities to engage with the delivery. And, the successful COP for us in Mongolia, first of all, we were talking about the multilateral agreements within the topics that needs to be done. The using geopolitical position of Mongolia to having the diplomacy to negotiate with the, come up with the common agreement is one of the main goals. And out of the COP, we're going to launch this opportunity for all these stakeholders to bring out with the step action agenda that we call it. And under the step action agenda, we are introducing the 3 initiatives, which will be the rangeland flagships and water nexus management, and most importantly, nature-based solutions. So, we are all combining together to setting up the hosting all these COP. The COP17 for the UNCCD is the first COP of this year to determine the next 2 COPs, where it's going to happen, the CBD in Armenia and in CCC in Turkey. So it is very important for us. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You mentioned restoring land, of course, also restoring hope. What gives you hope? Because Monsieur Fabius mentioned it is a geopolitical turmoil that we are all working in. What gives you hope then? For
right, the land is, within these initiatives, the first one, the highlighted initiative that we call it the rangeland flagship. So out of Mongolia, the 70% of the Mongolia is rangeland. So it contains when we talk about the land, it cannot be only determined to the UNCCD. It can be linked to the CBD and biological diversity is also in the climate change, right? And so therefore, restoring land is a social, economic, environmental issue. So that's why we believe that restoring land is the base of the restoring hope, as it is all environmental issue. So we have to start thinking of restoring the hope. There is a saying, land as soil. If there is no land and soil, there's no food. There's gonna be no food.
And no life then.
So without food, no life of human being or the life of the animals and stuff. So it linked everything. I think we call it the restoring land is base of all the environmental issues. So once you put investment in the land, we'll restore this hope of, having our Earth together.
Thank you.
As living. Thank you.
I mean, you already mentioned the Biodiversity COP as well. So we are, of course, coming to you. We would love to understand a little bit more when we talk about breaking the gaps, breaking the silos. How do we elevate the knowledge about biodiversity? How to close the gap from your perspective between climate, land, and biodiversity? And of course, how would you like to bring it all together then in Armenia, which makes it maybe different from Cali last year?
Thank you. Yes, it is indeed a pleasure and honor for me to join this year's Change Now event dedicated to climate, biodiversity, and land restoration. And I'm very happy to share this stage with prominent people. I appreciate also the opportunity to reflect on Armenia's perspective as the incoming presidency of Biodiversity COP17. So we have two COP17s, one is biodiversity and one on the desertification. And indeed, there is a greater need to elevate knowledge about biodiversity and the interlinkages between three Rio Conventions. Biodiversity, as is known, is the living fabric of our planet. It underpins human well-being of the present as well as the future generations. And its rapid decline threatens nature and people alike. And it is vital to transform people's actions and relationship with biodiversity to halt and reverse its decline. Hence comes the Armenian presidency's COP17 motto, which is taking action for nature. So biodiversity carries profound ecological, economic, and cultural importance. It underpins agriculture, water resources, disaster resilience, and rural development. It also shapes cultural heritage and daily life in many countries, including in Armenia, in ways that are often underestimated. And to elevate the political will and the awareness at the highest level and to halt biodiversity loss and protect ecosystems, the Armenian presidency is planning to host a leaders summit right before COP17 itself to bring together heads of state and government, globally recognized scientists, prominent cultural figures, celebrities who champion environmental causes. And this summit will aim to serve as a political anchor for COP17, setting the tone for an ambitious, solutions-driven conference and offer a platform for a unified global message to safeguard future of life on Earth. So COP17 is not just another meeting for us, it's a milestone also on the road to 2030. If you allow, it's a moment of truth for the implementation.
I'd like to come in with what Elizabeth was mentioning, because she mentioned we need a mindset, and this means, of course, we need communities also involved in the COPs. How would you like to include the society, the communal level in your COP? Maybe you can give us a glimpse, because to redesign a system, we need people. And we need to understand a little bit more what makes then the muscle of the community stronger. What's your take on that?
Yes, absolutely. Our presidency will place strong emphasis on stakeholder engagement and inclusion and on the human dimension of the biodiversity policy. So this includes strengthening the participation of women and youth and local actors, indigenous peoples, representative of local communities in the decision-making processes, and creating also meaningful opportunities for academic institutions, for private sector partners, and subnational authorities to contribute to the implementation of it. So we aim to ensure that COP17 serves as a platform for practical and solution-oriented exchange among all stakeholders. So the conference will not only drive the formal negotiation process, which is important, that we need to mobilize all the constructive positions of the member states to arrive into the consensual outcomes. But it will also showcase good practices, partnership models, and tools that are already making difference across the world.
Mm-hmm. What does collective action mean for you to bring, of course, global goals down to a national level, to the Mongolian perspective? Also, of course, NDCs, we are all aware of that, but what do you actually do to bring the topics of land into the Mongolian national perspective?
Well, definitely. Well, since we're talking about the COP17, it's same as CBD, COP17. So I'll talk about COP17 for UNCCT. So for Mongolia is, the effective collective action means, restoration. It's not a standalone project, right? Restoration for the land. And then it means, bringing all these stakeholders, same as CBD, stakeholders together for a common framework that positive outcome and delivery of the projects, the concepts. And therefore, it will require the involvement of all these private sectors and, NGOs, governments, local communities for the shared deliveries that we are expecting. And, the one investment should, within this case, all these stakeholders, the one investment should deliver the multiple outcomes. That's how we see these collective action means, for within the COP17 of UNCCT. And then, there are some gaps, the biggest gaps that, lack of coordination between the priorities and institutional capacity and the finance. So the political involvement in this area is still growing, but on the other hand, it needs to be matched by the stronger delivery mechanism and better alignment between the global ambition and the national implementation strategy.
What do you mean by that when it comes to the finance flows? Because at the end I mentioned the public money can be scarce right now.
Right,
so what do you see? Where is the lever for finance flows that are combining then land, biodiversity, and climate?
Right. So on the other hand, whoever in speaking of the general words, whoever in interest in to bring it up is the investors or whatever it is, the government's supposed to give them the environment of reduced risk to having the framework, institutional work, put it in the work. So this is how we need to see hold the conference itself.
We're coming to the finance flow back into a second. Monsieur Fabius, I'd like to go a little bit step back because, of course, when it comes to the mindset that we were also debating, the mindset of the generation restoration, how can governments be incentivized but also held accountable to prioritize these long-term land and ecosystem stewardship forward? What is your experience on that? Because the global level is one thing, but the other thing is also, of course, when we look into the national level, what do you then see as a main to-do?
Well, there is no secret. There is what one called national sovereignty. On the one hand, it's an excellent thing. On the other hand, it means that governments are free to act or not to act. Okay, but my point, and maybe if you agree, I could come back on that, is how can we reform the global governance in order to, not to force, but to encourage governments and society to integrate the three big ones.
What's your take? Let's dive in. Shall we merge the COPs? What do you need by governance? We are curious.
Okay, and I must say, before making some proposals, that I'm both voluntary and realistic. Okay. COPs are not perfect, that's clear, but they're useful. Okay. Therefore, it's a sort of mixed bag, and it would be a mistake to cancel them or to change them into a sort of permanent discussion without implementation. Okay. This being said, there are some elements which now are sure. It is scientifically clear that climate, biodiversity, and land cannot be separated. It is this your point, okay. They cannot be separated, but they can be contradictory. We must not forget that. And if we address one without the others, it is no longer sufficient. When I'm looking back to the previous time, there has been a period of time in which every COP was completely separated. Now it's beginning to change, and this year we shall have the 3 COPs. Okay. Therefore, I can imagine a sort of 3-tier system. First, in our different COPs, we have to integrate as much as possible the other COPs. When you will define your ordre du jour and yourself, and it is the same for climate, you have not to forget the other 2. Right. That's one point. And it's already the case. I've seen that in Belém. The Brazilian COP has been criticized, okay? But it was more open than before. Therefore, the first tier is to have COPs which are open to the other one. Second, the big question, shall we have to have a unique COP? My answer is no, I'm clear. Because it's too complex, because it will be a mess, because the legal bases are different. Therefore, I answer no. But I may imagine in 2030, 4 years, to have, and afterwards every 4 years, a super COP. The 3 of us. And it is not enough because COP is not enough, and you have to check permanently what are the results, what are what we call in climate NDCs, what are the problems, the relationship with all that and financing and so on and so forth. And therefore it's the reason why I imagine to have attached to the General Assembly of UN Climate and Nature Council. What could it be? Our Brazilian friends have proposed, they have studied a climate council attached to the General Assembly. Why? Because the usual spoilers, and there are new spoilers, they cannot paralyze the system in the General Assembly. They can do it in the Security Council, but not in General Assembly.
Monsieur,
and this Climate and Nature Council will examine and follow up the financial question, the relationship with all that, with the scientific points, and therefore, and maybe also, I have no time to explain that.
This is a whole other keynote here, Monsieur Fabius.
But this council could could deal with the emergency situations, because there is nobody in the UN system which deals with that. And therefore, having a permanent follow-up of the system, gathering the different aspects and the different scopes, and following the implementation of the system, it could be a new tier and a usual tier.
Thank you, Monsieur Fabius, because it's very precise with concrete ideas. And I remember we are often having this debate. I think all the change nows, they are asking the questions, oh, should we merge the COPs? Yes or no? And you gave us a clear idea. And to wrap it a little bit up, of course, you were nodding and you were taking notes quite heavily. So what is maybe a question mark to what Monsieur Fabius just mentioned for you? And of course, when it comes to the Biodiversity COP, or would you agree, is that a way forward? Because the times are changing. It's not 1992 anymore, right? And of course, we would be also very curious what you are saying, and maybe what you are planning to be debating at during the COP, during your COP.
Yes, indeed. I was taking careful notes of Mr. Fabius's suggestions and proposals. It would be a fantastic idea to deliberate the possibility of having a super COP, or indeed to have an adjacent body to the General Assembly. It's something that needs to be carefully and seriously considered. And about the coherence across Rio conventions. Indeed, it's high time, to have a synergy, and we all know that with climate, biodiversity, and the land restoration targets, they are converging in 2030, and our COP17, we see it as helping reinforce synergies across policy, finance, and technical dimensions, so that the countries can act more effectively and more efficiently. Climate change is among the primary drivers of the biodiversity loss. And in reverse, also biodiversity conservation can contribute to climate change mitigation and adaptation. So understanding the interplay between these processes, between climate change, biodiversity, and land degradation is critical for the implementation of effective and lasting solutions to climate change and for maintaining biodiversity and nature's contribution to people. And indeed, there is also a need to strengthen the continuity between COPs, as Mr. Fabius was mentioning earlier, between the three COPs, and our presidency will looking into these opportunities and try to do the efforts to make sure that it happens.
Thank you. Your Excellency, I have two questions for you. First of all, what was a question mark for you when we were listening to Monsieur Fabius' ideas, and of course very precise ideas of how to build a system, not just an idea, how to build a system and a structure?
Well, I really like the idea. I mean, I'm totally agree. The total, the background of all these COPs link at each other. So there is a question from Elizabeth, as she was mentioning in the opening remarks, that the linking of all these three COPs are logical, but as he mentioned, it's really hard to separate them. It's really hard to merge them as one super COP. But idea to having the super COP and every 4 years would be really. It might be a really good idea to try it out. But in my words, I think just to break the silos between all these conventions, we got to be, stop treating them as a different agenda. So, this is why the step action agenda for the COP17 UN is for the land. So land is where all these priorities meet, And then, we will definitely connect them with the integrated outcomes for the financial mechanism to implement it in all these three areas of the convention, and where land will be initiated all the time with CBD and CCC, and also the and CCD. There's always going to be a land, so that's why the COP for the Mongolian slogans would be restoring the land and restoring the hope, to connecting up all these conventions.
What would be your message? Because we have a lot of business people in the room as well, and business people are always interested in business cases. When it comes to restoration and creating that mindset of restoration, what would be your message to the business experts here in the field and in the room?
Right. My message to the private sector is that I'm still talking about land. That land restoration is not only private owners or it's a side activity, as it can be a linkage of all these three conventions. And also, take it as a long-term risk management and sustainable growth. So, in UN sensitive research, that every $1 investment in land can generate the $30 return in advance for a benefit. So I would like to encourage that out of all these private sectors investors to invest in the land to restore a hub. There is a saying, out of restoration finance, there's only 6% investment from the private sectors. Yeah, I would like to encourage everyone in the private sectors and to come out and invest in the land to restore a hub. And I would like to invite you all to the COP17 for Mongolia to explore a beautiful country of mine in August 17, and we're going to be a first COP of this year to determine the next two COPs. So it will be a good start for Mongolians and opportunities for globally. Every sector is welcome to Mongolia. Thank you.
Thank you. We have, of course, COP17, the Biodiversity COP from October 19 until the 30th. And we have the Climate COP in Turkey from November 9th until 20th. I only had 26 minutes with you, but I could go on and on and on with you, and we need a keynote from you and your very precise ideas next year on Change Now, to the organizers of Change Now. That would be amazing. Thank you so much to all of you. Thank you very much, Your Excellencies, for this wonderful conversation, to His Excellency Mr. Mher Margaryan, to His Excellency Mukhtamir Badbaya, and of course to Monsieur Laurent Fabius. Merci beaucoup. This is your round of applause. Thank you. Thank you.